Come on, say them.
Okay. Hi, everyone, and welcome to our event today. My name is Niloofar Golkar. I'm a postdoc with Social Justice Center here at Concordia and a coordinator with Research for Frontline. And I'm happy to introduce our panelists. Chanelle Gallant, on my left, is an abolitionist feminist who has been fighting to free women's sexuality from criminalization for over 25 years. She's a writer, thinker, frontline organizer, and the co-author of Not Your Rescue Project, Migrant Sex Workers Fighting for Justice. Chanelle has contributed to dozens of influential publications, including Pleasure Activism and Abolition Sex Work as abolition social work.
Abolish social work.
Abolish social work as we know it. She has spoken everywhere from the London School of Economics to Princeton and is currently a visiting activist scholar at the Center for Feminist Research at York University, Toronto. Well, welcome.
Thank you.
And then Dr. Elene Lam is the founder of Butterfly, Asian and Migrant Sex Worker Support Network. She's an assistant professor at York University and an activist scholar who brings nearly 30 years of transnational grassroots organizing experience into her academic work and pedagogy. Her research and teaching draw on decolonizing, arts-based, and innovative approaches to knowledge transfer and social change. With her transnational activist work, spanning from East and Southeast Asia, Australia, and Canada, Elene is committed to an interdisciplinary approach to integrate theory into practice. The commitment has guided her extensive work with diverse and marginalized communities to advance racial, migrant, gender, labor, sex worker, and disability justice, and to challenge carceral and anti-trafficking systems. Her research supports community-led transformative justice approaches for social and policy change. She holds a Master of Law in Human Rights, a graduate diploma in gender studies, and a PhD in social work. Her work is committed to building a platform for marginalized communities to transform society. Her research contextualizes their lives, realities within multiple scales and layers of oppression, whereby community leadership creates space and opportunity to affect structural change and transform society. And she's the co-author of the book that we're discussing today, Not Your Rescue Project. Welcome.
Thank you.
Okay, so I love the name, Not Your Rescue Project, just digs into the matter itself. The notion of victimization that is other side of criminalization. And it's a very unique book because it centers the voices of migrant sex workers themselves. It's quite rare from this aspect. I know that I read another book by Makeda Silveira, Silenced, on domestic migrant workers' stories in Toronto that like changed my view on work and labor 12 years ago. And now I'm very happy and honored to be here with you guys discussing this book. So can you give us a story of how this project came together?
Want to talk about first?
Yes.
You want me to? Okay. Well, first of all, I'm actually so curious how Makeda Silveira's book changed how you thought about labor. We just briefly be a conversation.
Oh, I'm in the hot seat now. Well, it's brought the actual experience of the migrant workers because we read the theory that, okay, women are oppressed in labor and like different spheres kind of like intersect with each other. But when you read the stories, firsthand stories of like what happens in the houses.
Mhm.
Then the workers, especially at the time, it was staying, living, situation, and how this multi-layer of operation goes hand in hand as part of the work, not separated. And then kind of like it brings the gendered and racialized, not separated from the
Yes.
work itself.
Yes, yeah.
So that was how.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's actually such interesting connections between migrant sex work and migrant domestic work, which maybe we'll get into. Because one of the arguments we make, one of our spicy hot takes, is that the reason migrant sex workers are oppressed in the way they are is in order to coerce them out of the sex industry and ensure a pool of migrant women who are available to do other kinds of work like domestic work, which is considered more gender appropriate work. The problem, there's the part of the reason that capitalists hate sex work is that often sex workers are in much more control over their labor than in other types of work. So there's a relationship here for domestic work is a perfect example of that. A live-in domestic worker is really actually living in the nightmare they think sex workers are. The potential for nonstop surveillance, the potential for not being able to even leave your workplace, the potential for worker employer abuse, including, is so high. And wage theft. I mean, you know, I read a report from, it might have been the National Domestic Workers Association, that said live-in caregivers, I think it was something like 25% of them weren't even getting 5 hours of sleep a night, which I think we mentioned in the book, due to the nonstop demands of their employers to take care of their children. Right? And so domestic work is a kind of job that actually, like the garment industry, requires coercion for women to do. And nobody thinks about this. Nobody connects these dots. But we see this in migrant sex worker experiences. And that is why you need the stories to really bring it to life. But what we really did was connect these dots at a much higher level than anyone else does. No one else is thinking about the fact that the oppression of migrant sex workers, they're not thinking about the fact that that has to do with staffing shortages in care facilities. That has to do with distribution centers. That has to do with making sure there's people to work in the farms and the fields for minimum wage or less than minimum wage. I guarantee you no one is thinking about that. And that's actually because of the hypersexualization of sex work, especially in the West, due to the poisonous influence of Christian purity culture that has prevented people from being able to understand sex work as a form of labor and then looking at it within the context of labor, global labor. If you want to understand sex work, you should be thinking about global labor. And most people can't. They get so stuck at the sex part. Oh my God, but what about, right? And so, thank you. I did not answer your question one bit. But I answered a question I thought was more fun. But I will tell you briefly, we met in 2013. I was working at a sex work organization. Elene walked in to say hello. I was in a room that had posters from sex work organizations internationally, including Z10. And Elene told me that she had been the executive director of Z10. And she was new to Toronto, and I was like, we should really talk. And that was, I guess, like 12 years ago. And then our collaboration began from there. The first piece of writing we probably did was 10 years ago. I'm gonna guess it was probably about 2014, 2015, you know, writing like press releases or just activist writing. And then eventually, our publisher Haymarket was looking for a book on migration and sex work, and want to give credit to the fact that they didn't know about us. And it was Harsha Walia who made the introduction and introduced us to our publisher. And then we had multiple conversations with them. And we were really on the same page politically. They gave us a lot of political support, including when we said, can we extend the length of the book by a third to include the voices of the workers? And they said yes.
And I think like also no more like juicy parts, you know, like we wrote this book during pandemic, you know, like all the day and night. So, but I think because like I really despite you read the credential, so I always feel so embarrassed to be honest. I start the movements like from 3 years old. So that's why I am in the movement for 30 years. But it's really what I learned about the movement actually is not from academic institute. I learned most actually is from the community. So that's why I cannot have the work without their voice. So that is because my organizing experience, learning from so amazing like genius sex worker community, so that like really inform my understanding and analysis. And I think in like particularly in the beginning of the organizing in Toronto, we have been doing a lot of work working with the worker, you know, like outreach. And because I was new to Toronto, so that we have workers like being arrested in Saskatchewan. I even don't know where is Saskatchewan. How I go there? No, you need to fly as 5 hours, right? So and then how Chanelle keeps supporting, you know, mobilize and work with no one's is illegal, you know, like how to mobilize people, supporting the worker individually. So, but also like how to advocate. So that when the city of Toronto tried to shut down of the Asian massage parlor, so that how we work together, support the worker and also like to do all this like advocacy work. But I think it is also very valuable because we have been keep fighting. And so we know that we have a lot of like similar understanding of the issue. We have written a like small piece of the work, but I think this book really give us the opportunity, sit down, come together to look at historically what happened, what is the problem of anti-trafficking movement, why we think anti-trafficking movement cannot be fixed, right? So like many people say, how we can do no harm. We do a lot of training so that we have a lot of feminist organization that how I can do better anti-trafficking work. Why we think is no way you can make better the anti-trafficking work, because it is historically create to like harm, control, and criminalize migrant age, like migrant racialized sex worker. And we see I work with migrant sex worker is one of the like a group being target and bring in like how the state, you know, like law enforcement, social worker cannot be the one to fix the problem of exploitation because it's so deep. Is like the situation of migrant, you know, women, and the vulnerability is created by the condition, you know, that is cannot be fixed by the rescue industry, but instead the rescue industry how continues benefit from the worker, right? So and I think that is like create the opportunity. This book project, we have the dialogue, but again, because so many workers' voice is so powerful, so some of the workers is voices is actually we when we do a lot of like advocacy work, you know, and and also when we support the sex worker, for example, when the worker being arrested before they are deported. So I visit them, is like, is there any message you want to tell the society, right? And some of the pieces actually come from, you know, the workers' experience of the rape, you know, some of the story is document on like butterfly publication, but some of them is particularly the complexity of people life. We may not have chance to publish before. I think this book really give the opportunity, you know, we have like the little bit collection of what the workers have been shared with us, but also have like some new interview, you know, of some of the activists, also some of the worker. And again, why this book is so important, because we really see this book is not sit on the bookshelves. That's why it's so beautiful, powerful, colorful, because you can hear the story, not only the experience of oppressed, but also the experience of resistance. And I think this is a very beautiful part. And I hope that you will hold the book and then be part of the movement. You know, I think this is the reason how we work together and why you find like the voice of the workers is centered, because it's really they are like educating us and inform our analysis, right?
Yeah, the workers are in there because that's where our theory comes from. So I started calling it abolitionist community generated analysis, which is, what if you looked at all the impacts of criminalization and you just asked the question, What if all these impacts were deliberate? So an example is criminalization often means sometimes people are pushed out of the sex industry, but very often it means they're trapped in the sex industry because they have criminal convictions, right? What if all you do is you stop believing the absolute complete bullshit that says those are, that the state is not trying to harm us, and said, what if they were, guys? Because they know this is happening. It's not new. This isn't subtle. This is what happens everywhere that sex work is criminalized. People are coerced into staying in the industry. It prevents their exit because of employment discrimination due to convictions, or an absence in, if nothing else, even just an empty section of your resume, right? But really, it's the presence of things like being known to police, having convictions, association with all kinds of other ways that being criminalized harms someone. All we did was say, what if that wasn't an accident? Because if that doesn't feel like a very sophisticated, it's not a reach. It's not a huge reach. And that's why, where our theory comes from is we look at workers and we're like, huh, you're actually being forced into domestic work because you got pushed out of sex work. What if that was the point?
That's a very interesting, important point for sure. And most of this book kind of like tries to unpack layers of state violence that happens with the law enforcement, through the court system, through job system, and then through NGOs and civil society, how they reinforce anti-trafficking kind of like industrial complex itself. And then social groups within the society who also, at the best case scenario, have pity for the people and then wants to save them. But all that kind of like contribute to what you are saying. And the decriminalization, when 10 years ago we discussed that decriminalization was on the floor in the courts, but then since then we see that so-called decriminalization of sex work happened, but everything around it is criminalized, which means that decriminalization never happened. And these stories in this book kind of like gives the first-hand stories that how now we have this sugar-coated language of victim supporting task force that then you're like, oh, this probably supposed to help somebody, but then you go and see it is a police officer and immigration enforcement kind of like officer. How does that them supposed to support the victim of the situation? So can you kind of like explain why the state needs this sugar-coated language?
Yeah, I think before answer this question is like, we know the state always is so violent, doing a lot of like harmful stuff, right? So, and again, giving the illusion of like sex work is decriminalized in Canada. This is a false information. It's not true. Sex work continues being criminalized. But how they sell it, they say, okay, if you are a sex worker, you will not be criminalized. It is not true. Sex workers, they may have immunity, they don't get charged, but all their activities still criminalized. If the sex worker provides sexual service, they will still be evicted. If you help other sex worker, you will be still arrested. How you can have an industry? How you can do the work when the client is criminalized, right? But this is a sample you see, with the success of the sex worker movement, more and more people support sex worker. So that's why they need to create this illusion, make people believe that now the government is protecting sex worker. It's not true. They are not protecting sex worker. They are protecting, like they claim, protecting community from the sex worker, right? They continue to criminalize sex worker, but with the language, many people believe in Canada, sex work is decriminalized already. It's not true. So that's why it's very important you help to promote this like idea and let the people know. Now it's also having the constitution challenge again. The sex worker group is organized to challenging the law. And so this is like one of the example. And anti-trafficking industry, we know more and more people support the sex worker rights in last few decades because of more movement group, more like grassroots organizing really recognize, people have right to decide the work, sex work should not be criminalized, should not be illegal. So the anti-trafficking language is used to push back the sex worker movement, right? Because they just keep conflating sex work and human trafficking. They say, I accept sex worker, but you see, they do it for money. It is exploitation. And then in the world, who is not doing work for money under like the analysis of Marxism, everyone is like exploitation, right? But then it's cover up, like that, the anti-sex work agenda, and also anti-trafficking is also used it to cover the anti-migrant agenda. So one of the example is because of the lobbying of anti-trafficking group, all the migrant is not allowed to work in sex industry. If you work in sex industry, if you are refugee claimant, if you under sponsorship, you will become illegal, you will be deported, or you will lose your chance to get to be the permanent resident. How you can protect victim by, take away the right to make their life become illegal, right? And also, as you say, before the police come in to arrest the worker, but now they don't get a lot of support. Now they do the thing is like they go to internet, they come to claim they protect the worker. But in reality, our book also document some of the experiences, like the law enforcement came in and then like the workers was sleeping, they broke the door and she was handcuffed. She was not allowed to wearing the clothes until she provide the information of like who is she work with, and her phone, her tablet is all being seized. And after she provide the information, she is like the handcuff being lost, like taken away. But then a social worker come in, give her a shitty phone, and then so that how can I help you? She has a smartphone, and she even don't know how to use this Nokia's old phone anymore. But then who is benefit, right? We know that the NGO, the government is benefit. For example, Ontario, the government have given $300 million for the anti-sex work organization majority. And they also give a lot of like resources to law enforcement, continues to target like the sex worker. And who are they target? We know Indigenous like youth and also migrant sex worker, because their voice is being silenced, right? Because of the victim label. Even they speak in many meetings. So 300 workers went to City Hall, say, I'm not traffic victim. And then the anti-trafficking group say, you're so victimized, you don't know who you're a victim. You don't speak English, how you can consent? So a lot of French people have the problem, you don't speak English. How you can consent, right? But this is so powerful to cover the real intention, because when you say why they need that, it's because of the success. I have to say, the feminist movement, migrant movement, racial justice movement, they cannot explicitly say that, do that. So that's why they harming the people in the name of like protection. So, and this is so important. That's why our book really want to show that, to let the people know about the reality, because when we were in the community, so many people, particularly in the NGO, so they got funding, so that how I can reach out to traffic victim, how I can support traffic victim, how they can do better anti-trafficking work. So that's why we really want to uncover what is the reality, what actually anti-trafficking industry is doing. So that particularly, I think one of the purpose of our book, we found so many people on the left, suppose they are like anti-policing, even those people is like in the anti-policing movement, but then why they suddenly will support the anti-trafficking movement, will support the rate of the law enforcement, so-called rescue the people, right? So that's why the Candy paper is so successful, because they make so many people think anti-trafficking work is a human rights work, anti-trafficking work is a feminist work. They get so much support. So that's why the candy paper was so successful, so that way we want to tear out to let the people know this is poison, this is not like candy, actually it's like the poison doing.
No.
Okay.
So why we are on the topic of the NGOs, I want to read a section of the book, a shortened version of it. It says, anti-trafficking nonprofits form a billion-dollar industry composed of what you describe as the full spectrum of the right. White supremacists, Republicans, union-busting multinational corporations such as Amazon, Walmart, Boeing, Shell Oil and Gas, and Palantir, a tech firm that provides mass surveillance technology for the US military in Iraq and Afghanistan, and platforms for racist gang databases used by law enforcement and ICE. Another example is the National Center on Sexual Exploitation, NCOSE, formed by far-right white Christians in 1962. Advocates for the prohibition of all forms of sex work and the elimination of sex education in schools, the banning of sex toy stores, and gay marriage, and of course, abortion. So it's like this research that you have done and provided
You know, you
here.
missed TERFs.
First,
TERFs are in there too.
yes.
They definitely want to get their hands in the, they're very tight in the anti-trafficking world too. Yeah.
Yeah, so it shows a complex kind of like very powerful businesses behind this anti-trafficking, and how much money they generate each year is multi-million each of these groups that I mentioned. And the whole industry of anti-trafficking have become a billion-dollar kind of like industry. So many people are profiting from this forms of victimization.
Mhm.
Can you expand on that, and like, how did this become so big?
Yeah.
You go first.
You want to
Like,
try?
yeah, you
How
go
did it
first.
become so big?
Yes, you go first.
I mean, something that I feel like Elene has said to me a lot is that almost everyone can benefit from the anti-trafficking industry in some way.
Except the worker.
Except the workers. The workers are the exploited resource. But like such a wide range of different social actors can either socially or usually economically benefit through the anti-trafficking industry. Because I mean, that's the structure of oppression. People don't listen to, believe, or even allow migrant sex workers to safely speak, let alone work. There's a reason our book is rare. Migrant sex workers are subject to the longest running continuous travel ban in the United States. It's 150 years old this year. This is the first book that actually has first person accounts. That's not because migrant sex workers have nothing to say. It's because it's too dangerous. And they live in effectively already a police state. So with that level of oppression, a lot of people can make a meal out of that. So Christians can start, they're like, I'm on an anti-trafficking crusade, and I'm gonna do a fundraising walk. Our church is gonna go do a mission in Thailand or Cambodia, and we're fundraising, right? So they get moral legitimacy and money. Then you've got, let's see, the major corporations, right? So what is Shell and oil and gas doing on the boards of anti-trafficking organizations? Whitewashing their reputation, making themselves look like good corporate citizens. Because guess what anti-trafficking, it gets more nefarious than this. I'm going to give you another rationale for why corporations might want to be involved in anti-trafficking organizations. The big anti-trafficking organizations are the ones that get to write anti-trafficking policy. That's immigration policy. That's who the government consults with. when they developed their anti-trafficking policies. And anti-trafficking policies are all, I mean, the word trafficking is to move, right? It's movement. So it increases the surveillance of movement, increases banking surveillance, it increases banking restrictions, it increases restrictions on entry, who can move, where they can move. So it is a sideways way that they get to enter into policy development. They look amazing. Everyone's like, oh my God, Walmart, Boeing, Shell, Amazon, Palantir, the super demons at Palantir. If you don't know who Palantir are yet, you should. These people have put our people and our planet on a suicide path, right? They're killing the world and destroying societies and exacerbating inequality. And they get to whitewash that reputation by being associated with what looks like a human rights campaign. And potentially have influence in the development of policies, government policies that regulate things such as migration. That's the big picture.
And I give like example in Canada, Canadian Center to End Human Trafficking. Always need to call them out. They have no experience working with any community. But then when the government launched the anti-trafficking hotline so that they get like $40 million when there is like the cuts of violence against women organization, they cut off the funding of like the settlement service. But then you can see those are the feminists. It's very interesting. Before the the contract giving out, they already, you can see this political connection, politician is benefit by saying anti-trafficking. We know Dr. have so much pushback of his policy, violence against women, like reduce of the immigration, legal clinic. But when they say anti-human trafficking, everyone is supporting them, right? So and all the activists, no matter what you have doing, what is your background, when you say anti-trafficking, then you become the hero. And then they have been getting so much power, resources, and influences. And one of the example is when we go to give the talk, sharing our work, and some of the frontline worker come to us, she say she feels so uncomfortable because in the anti-human trafficking program, because they don't have enough victims, so that they keep finding different victims. The CEO gets 3 times increase of the salary because of the anti-trafficking work. But how much the victim they identify live in the shelter they got is $10 gift card. And I thought it's $10 gift card per day. So she say, no, it's $10 gift card per week. And so and that is the system. That's why we call it anti-trafficking industrial complex. It's really the industry. We know media, in US, more law enforcement, now they start the new corporate, to do anti-trafficking education, right? So in Peel region, one of the area in Toronto, near Toronto. So the police got 10 million funding, to do all this policing, anti-sex work rate, and then they become the hero because now they go to training other NGO, other people, to go to university, go to school, how to identify traffic victims, right? So, and this is really, that's why it's really industry, everyone is, benefiting, benefiting, including the money, including the power, including continues to control, the racialized migrant and women and sex workers.
Yeah, to give you just another really concrete example of profiting, something that I've learned through Butterfly's work is that they will find workers, the municipal bylaw inspectors will go into massage parlors, they'll find workers, and then they use that money to fund the inspection team. That's how they basically fundraise for their own police forces, is from the workers, which is similar to finding unhoused people. They're using the poorest, oppressed people, and they're still actually trying to extract money from them. And so in Toronto, there was what was it called? Adult Services Team. And that team's entire function was to surveil the massage sector. And then if they find any type of non-compliance, that could be anything, right? I mean, because there's a lot of the municipal code is like half a foot long. And so it's pretty easy if you send in officers whose entire job is to police you. If they hang around long enough, they'll find something, then they can find people in the massage parlors, and that's actually how they fund their own police team.
Yeah. This is official, right? So in US, actually, when the police do the raid, officially they can seize the funding, the money from the worker to their official funding, right? So in the anti-trafficking way, you know, when actually it's nothing about human trafficking, but when they have criminal charge against the sex worker, and then the sex worker that like even the house is being seized because they see, you know, this is the money from the organized crime, because sex work together is being seen as organized crime, right? So that is like the really like the huge one. Of other example is in town of Newmarket, the city tried to shut down all the massage parlor. So 5 massage parlor being fined $50,000 ticket in 2 weeks. So that is like, again, like benefit everyone except, you know,
The workers.
the workers.
People should, when you read about a raid happening on a massage parlor, you should understand that it's an armed robbery. Officers go in there with guns. No one else is allowed to do that. They are allowed to seize. So what Elaine just mentioned is, what I mentioned was that's the low key version of robbery, where they're just soaking people for money by fining them and ticketing them. But it gets a lot more intense than that. They're allowed to say all of the money on site is the proceeds of crime and keep everyone's wages. Many workers want to live in the massage parlor because they tour, they travel around, they want to live where they're working. It's more convenient because you can travel and you don't have to pay for a separate home and workplace. That means all their money's there, because they're also not allowed to have bank accounts. It drives me crazy when people are like, women couldn't have bank accounts until, I'm like, sex workers still can't. Sex workers never got the right to have bank accounts. So that means they're more likely to have cash, also because clients want to use cash because of their criminalization to protect themselves. They want to pay the worker in cash. The worker can't use a bank account, so she's keeping cash. And then you get a raid. And the officers are like, if 2 people are doing illegal activity together under Canadian law, that's organized crime, right? If I do a crime and you do a crime and we do it together, that's organized crime, which means now you can take all the money. Yeah, I know. It's really, it's designed for extraction.
And this is officially, you remember, like you help one of the workers, so like that is like she has $10,000. It is all her earning, you know, in a year. So, and then that is being taken away of the police without any record. We have other worker in detention center. She has a ring, you know, like the jewelry is her mother passed away, is give her as a gift, you know, and then when she deported, everything disappeared, right? So that's like, in addition to this official like seize, but there is like, when they have the power, they just like keep abusing them and taking all
Yeah,
that back.
it's the 3 layers of economic exploitation. There's the ticketing, then there's seizure, then there's robbery, where they can do it, right? Like, of course, the cops can get away with it. They can just rob. They're legally allowed to seize, but they can also just rob. They can just be like, what jewels? What diamonds? We don't know what you're talking about. Who's gonna stop them? And that's because of the extreme power difference between the police and migrant sex workers. Yeah.
Yeah, and this is one of the areas that is like the law usually being applied to some people, but not everybody. And that's why the laws exist. Well, I want to quote Kafka.
Really?
Yeah. That door was created only for you, and everybody else is passing through. And that's why we have so many laws, and you see that they apply to some people, but not everybody. And
I think we use the concept is like the castle web, right? So migrant sex worker is being catched by municipal law, immigration law, you know, criminal law, even like the labor laws supposed to protect the worker. Now we also have a lot of worker get a ticket from Ministry of Labor. They force them to provide information of the worker in order, you know, to continue the investigation in the name of the protection. So people think the legal system is designed to protect people. I say they are only protect some of the people who have power and resources. The legal system is like the cage. It's like the castle web to catch the people actually is the legal system is the system to oppress. It's never about protection, right? So I think that is not only the door to let some people in, but actually it's the cage that they try to like catch, like some people
Trap.
continue to trap the people and oppress the people.
Yeah, totally. Continue on the discussion of who is benefiting. You have touched on international migration flow, racial hierarchy, organization of labor, how law enforcement kind of like specific pattern of behavior. The third area that you talked about is appropriation of women's sexuality in service of heteropatriarchal family. And that's been happening from the beginning of capitalism, from the whole notion of private property was by major part of it was separation of women, their control over their body by calling them part of the property. And now we see all this fuss around consensual sex. Why consensual sex is so much threatening to these so-called values of our society?
You
You're
start,
the
no,
expert.
you start.
No. This is like you have been written about that.
Okay, what's the question? Can you repeat it? The last part? Sorry.
Why consensual sex
Yes,
is a threatening concept?
right. Why is consensual sex a threatening concept? That is in fact the subject of my next book. So I know this is why Elaine is making me answer this question first. Okay. I think, I think because one of the reasons I would say is because sex serves many social and economic functions. And it has social and economic value. And so the forces that want to exploit our resources to control our bodies want to be able to control consensual sex. I mean, in an unequal society has no use for consensual sex. That's not a value in an unequal, violent society. It does not value consensual sex. You know, I don't know, let me just give you, I don't know, where do I start? I was recently reading about, this is gonna get very heavy for a moment. So I was reading about prostitution policy in under the Third Reich in German fascism. How the Nazis regulated sex work. And they did, obviously. And I think most people would just assume maybe they were anti-sex work, you know, which is, they were not. That's not true at all, actually. They were very anti-street work. Street workers got sent to concentration camps. So it was extreme punishment for street work. And so the second part of my abolitionist methodology is it's not just what if it's deliberate, but who benefits. Actually, I realize that's the two things we do. We just look at sex workers' experiences through all of our experience and say, what if this is deliberate? It sure looks like they meant to do this. And who is benefiting from this? And so under the Nazis, they heavily penalized street work, but they set up military brothels. Which were coerced. That's sexual assault, by the way. If someone is coerced into sex, that is just sexual assault. I don't use the word trafficking because of its implication with criminalization. If someone is having sex against their will, we actually already have a perfectly good term for that. It's called sexual assault, right? And that's because, why did they do that? Well, because the military is a hyper masculine, cold, hard, mean type of space. And a brothel provides men with emotional comfort. So you'll see it in some hyper masculine spaces where you'll see the what they wanted was not just brothels. Of course, the brothels were not run by the workers. I mean, they were all being forced. It's run with what fascist environments like are police run brothels. and the police are extracting all of the wealth. And the benefits of the services sex workers provide significantly emotional labor. It's not just sex. That's actually, again, part of the hypersexualization of sex work. Sex work is very substantially emotional labor. It's companionship, it's softness, it's intimacy, it's warmth, it's touch. And so a lot of men, where there's like a high concentration of men-only spaces, you'll see sex work. Because they're not getting it from wives. Basically, our society is set up that women are assigned that work. You're the one who explained primitive accumulation to me. You tell me now, based on what you have heard. Yeah. That's my research. That's my theory. How do you see that playing into capitalist accumulation that I just described?
I agree with you that it has a huge kind of like part. It's like when women lose their power over their body, or either through abortion, anti-abortion, like criminalization of LGBTQ, criminalization of trans people existence that is going on, and hand in hand with rise of fascism and authoritarianism that then is kind of like controlling the flow of immigration, and this more creating more and more disposable kind of like forms of labor and workers, disposable form of workers, especially with AI coming, and like lots of jobs gonna be lost, and like I see all this connected to each other. So through hyper criminalization of specific groups in the society, they control and then reinforce that hierarchy of who is valuable and who is not. So they can dispose harsher and in faster pace if it needed, which with the way that we're going, both from climate change perspective, need harsher immigration borders, because many parts of the world are becoming unlivable. From AI, we don't need labor as much as we need it. And actually we need more people in low paid jobs, because AI can't do the jobs that people are putting lots of physical kind of like labor into. And then, so all these are like why we see some criminalization of different bodies more and more hand in hand with rise of authoritarianism, in my opinion. But yeah,
Go ahead, sorry.
please. I wanted to ask him the question.
But I think that like I just want to add like how, you know, I often don't use the term consent, because in our world how much thing we can consent, right? So that like no matter how much restriction, so that it's the decision making, people still showing the agency, you know, like even the only one option, so that it's like very vulnerable, low pay situation for the sex worker, they still take it up. But I think why sex work is so powerful, because they really give people have power, right? People experience domestic violence, they can use sex work to run away, you know, from the abusive relationship. They have the economic advancement so that they can go to other classes, because if you're marginalized low income people, so that you may stuck in certain social class. But for being a sex worker, so that like not only income help you to go to other classes, but also like you have the social resources, you have the network that is so powerful and also liberating. So many people have the experience of having sex, you know, that is like really wild, like really very powerful, threaten those have power, right? So, and I think that's why they want to contain this group of people. So like only allow sex happen in specific context under family system, marriage system, you know, like certain system that they can continue, you know, exploit, you know, woman body particularly, or like some specific group of people. We see when we talk about sex liberating, is mainly about the white woman, right? So like that when the black woman, they are like sexually more open, they're being like have a lot of label of the slut, you know, stuff that kind of like continues to criminalize them in so many different ways. And through sex work is also You know, why we always ask why people can fuck around and without problem, and then they get money become problem. You know, can you explain, right? So that basically, again, they want to take away your power, only allow you to have sex in certain contexts because they know how sex work is so powerful. Other example is again in Newmarket. The worker, they work in massage parlor, they do body work, no matter they do sex work or not. They have a lot of autonomy. The workers say, I do this job, you know, I feel more free, I have lesser time, it's better for my body. But they say, no, you should not work here. You're the good people. So let's work in the senior home to serve our people. You know, like you can see these racial capitals that you are only non-disposable. You can be used and exploited by us. But if you have the context that you can be more powerful, get more resources, so they want to criminalize you because they want to stop you from doing that and control you, right? So, and I think this is also related to migrant. We know that immigration policy is create a vulnerability of migrant that they can be exploited to continue to support the economy of our system. That's why you see the immigration policy, they don't want to give people rights. That's why the migrant group keeps saying status for all, because it's not about the surface, not about the protection. When the people have the immigration status, they have the right. But why the government don't want to do it? Because they know they want to have the policy create the vulnerability of a migrant that they can be exploited like by the society, right? So and sex work is a very powerful like resistance. So that's why they have like extra like criminalized
Control.
compared with like
Yeah. I think, like, because I'm such a communist, I always think about the power of sex work because it's of the control over its value. Right? Like, I think you really emphasize how people can use sex work as a form of resistance to systems of power. And for me, what I really notice, I think about is how sex work allows people to wrench control over the value of sex for themselves. So what I was going to say, for example, in these these military brothels, what they're doing is they're forcing women to provide the value of pleasure. They're trying to direct who gets the pleasure. So it's not us, right? Then with the forced labor, they're trying to control the economic value of it. They don't get the money. Then they're trying to control the value that sex work allows people to migrate. They want to control that. Then Elaine gave the example, people use sex work a lot to avoid or leave marriage. They don't want that, right? Like, people use sex work to get enough money to be able to leave a marriage they don't want to be in, not just because it's abusive, but also because they maybe don't want to be in a marriage. Secondly, sex work wages allow women to have children without men. They don't want that either. All those things fascists don't like. Women being able to make that level of autonomy, where I go, what country I go to, who receives the pleasurable benefits of sex, and the wages. Yeah.
I want to give some time to the audience to ask questions too. So I asked one last question. Months ago, we had an anti-fascist feminist panel here. And
You want to just put it with the
on the panel. As I was. So like, the question came up that if the state get to the point that you have to run, who do you run to, or where do you run to? And I said I would go to those who have been living under police state, because they have created strong networks of support and survival and resistance and resilience. So I want to ask, what lessons do you?
I think so. Little bit background, because before I moved to Canada, I was the organizer in Asia. So at that time, I really my honor have chance to like different countries. So and a lot of like those countries is like under dictatorship, you know, like the military control, you know, the people already, as you say, they have so many different way of resistance, how they like deal with all the policing, like all the violence every day, and then how they can use creative way, to push back, right? So, and I think some now because of the increase of fascism, like more like oppression of migrant, racism, so and policing and criminalization, so that like actually the sex worker all over the world have been facing that already. They are already using different way, like to resist that. Like one of the example is like in Cambodia, so it is illegal to be the street-based sex worker. So self-sex is illegal. So what they do is they sell orange. They sell orange on the street, so that is not illegal. But when there is like the law enforcement, harm them, so that like, of course, like people think bribe is something wrong, but they see the bribe actually is a tax, they pay, for the law enforcement. And but with the increase of the policing, so like all the worker actually stand outside the police station, actually is use the political power, to stop the policing, and then how they also lobby, different people, influential, even the daughter of the ministry, like using different whatever way they can fight for the rights, right? They also organize, they don't have an office. It is illegal for many sex worker group. They organize, they have a boat, that the boat become their office, and how they come together to fight against the pharmaceutical company, because the pharmaceutical company is work with the NGO to do the like test of the drug HIV, like test on their body, right? So like, but the worker also telling you, so like every day is like the soldier come with the gun, to force them to offer the sex work. So that is the situation they have been facing. Despite that, they have a lot of different creative way, individually resist and collective resist, and then how they also involve politically to change the society. When you look at the history, and now actually many sex worker group is also active political group, bring the social change, bring the social justice. But at the same time, they also keep resisting, in the individual level, instead of like just like accept the situation. I think this is very, very powerful. It strongly like impact how I do the organizing and learning, all this like powerful creative like resistance. Yeah.
You're gonna have to remind me of the question. It's like lessons.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, if I thought you were at risk, if I was concerned about you, I would say you need to be in small groups of people who are similarly positioned to you, sharing information offline. That's what people actually do. That's how people survive. I think bigger picture, like Elaine was talking about, all the resistance, and the creativity, but that's what you need to share with each other. Like and you know what I mean, like a pod, like a small group of people that are similarly targeted, right? Who are all sharing information, because what you do is you piece together the picture of how the state is operating. What are they doing? What does enforcement look like? Like, just say it's immigration, to give an example. What does enforcement look like at different border stops? Where did you recently see that they started to do checks on people's papers? You know what I mean? To give an example.
Yeah.
If it was something like trans healthcare, I might be like, okay, which healthcare facility is not reporting trans identity and will say that you need this surgery for another reason? Who's the doctor who will prescribe? So, and that's all information that people share in small trusted groups. And that's what I would do and that is what I do when I am supporting people who are facing different kinds of criminalization or targeting by the state. Get yourself other people and start problem solving and sharing information about sharing information about what enforcement looks like is one of the most important things you could do, to me.
Yeah, interesting. That's very similar to how small social movement groups shape, and like there is an issue and how they can creatively confront it in different ways.
Yeah, it starts really, that's why, when you read movement histories, And so many of them, have you noticed, start at a kitchen table?
Yeah.
Right? Because it fits about 5 or 6 people. And that's just the right size to have like a group of people figuring out how are we going to survive this with each other.
Yeah, and I think one of the thing is like how the powerful people continues the oppression is like two things, right? One is they make us have so much fear. The fear is like powerful enough to control more than, you know, the system institution control us, right? The other is like keep separate people and make them against of each other, right? So that's why the creative resistance is so important, because the institution, there is no solution. It is designed for you because whole system is designed to against you. So that's how the creativity is so important, like to understand what kind of resources, like what kind of condition you can turn it to resources that you can resist and push back and then have the hope, right? So like even small change, that how you can be the person as agent of change to change your life situation, to change the situation of the community or change the social system, even not this moment, but how the work is continues moving on, right? So that like think how to have the hope, you know, how to have the creativity and also push back like the fear, and also how the powerful institution keep dividing us. So I think this is also very like important, and this is what I learned from. Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much for the discussion. I know Ellen has a short
Oh, yeah.
slides to